people died off years ago.
We happy meet you. Thanks.
Oh. We are the better men.
Better man?
Emphasis on the better.
Is that your home? Kind of big, isn't it?
Hey, girl. Another teenage girl. Yeah? A girl. Friend! I've never had a girlfriend before. Neither me either. What do we do? How do we say to each other without any car voices? Let's get it going. I don't know if cave people belong in a modern world.
What's your problem, big guy? This place is changing everyone.
Guy?
We really need to limit Funk's window time.
Not now, Douglas. The birds are on.
In my day, we didn't stare at birds. We fought them. Let me live my life.
Hello, and welcome to the 42nd video of this little series we have get going. The recommended movie of the week is the new release, The Croods: A New Age. I'm pretty sure you guys can watch it on Hulu, or you could always find it online. But anyhow, let's get straight into it. Our topic this week is none other than Introduction to Absolute Value. Now, absolute value basically means when you use absolute value, you are only working in the positive realm. Now remember when I said in the last video, we took a number line, we said 0, and we said, let's say negative 20 and 20, and we said that these two numbers were opposites because they were the same distance from 0. They were both 20 units away from 0. Now I say 20 because we deal with positive. Negative 20 is still 20 away from 0. You can't say negative 20 away from 0 unless you're using direction. But that's a whole different topic or concept you're going to have to discover way deep into your high school career. But when we use absolute value, we look at the positive value. So if I said, what is the absolute value of negative 20? It's just 20. If I said, what's the absolute value of 20? It's 20. Absolute value is just the distance from 0 in positive terms. Distance from 0 in positive terms. That's kind of my little cut definition of it. But if I said negative 50, what is the absolute value of negative 50? Well, I would draw my number line and I would say, okay, this is 0 and this is negative 50. Negative 50 is 50 units away from 0. So that means the absolute value of negative 50 is 50. Now, we don't use words. We always have to write something. We can't just say 50 plus 50. We always have to use like a little symbol, like the add. So the symbol for absolute value is 2 straight lines. Don't get confused with parentheses. These are two different things. That is not, if I said parenthesis 50 plus 50, that is very different from absolute value of 50 plus 50. They give you two different answers depending on your signs and whatnot. So whenever I use absolute value, I put the first line, whatever I want to put after it. So let's say I just want to find the absolute value of... I'm sorry, I had to kind of mute my voice for a second. It was getting kind of loud. We're all susceptible to it. We're in the household. We're making the best of it. So let's just continue. We have the absolute value symbol. We write whatever I want to write. I could just write a number. I could write all these little equations and such. Whatever I want to be in the absolute value, I put it. But for now, let's just say 50. So what's the absolute value of 50? It's 50. Whatever the positive version of that number is, it's the answer to the absolute value of it. So let's say negative 25. The way I would say it is I would take the number, I would erase anything before it, and I would say, all right, I have a 25. So I would just say positive 25. I would say if I have a positive 21, I would erase what's in front of it, and I would say, positive 21. So all you have to do for absolute value is if it has a negative in front of it, take away the negative and turn it into a positive. If it has a positive, take away the positive and turn it into a positive. Now you can say to yourself, oh, when it's a negative, I just turn it to a plus sign. And whenever it's like a positive number like 50, I just keep it that way. But I'm just kind of being general here, because if you forget that little rule and you make a little mistake on the quiz because you think that absolute values turn negatives to negatives, then you're gonna not do well. So this is why I always tell you to scratch whatever's in front of the number and then just put a plus in front of the number in your answer. So last one, let's do a positive 52 before we move on. That's a 52. So we're just going to erase what's in front of it and put a positive over here and then whatever the number was. So we put a positive 52. Absolute values make whatever's within it a positive number, because when we deal with distances from 0, they're always positive. Remember, distance from 0 in positive terms. Distance from 0 is always positive. Now, one last thing I want to talk about absolute values. If I said, well, we went over if I said negative 15, what would that be? And if I said 115, what would the answer be? Both in absolute values. We have the absolute value signs. Exactly, this would be 15, and it's 115. It's just the positive versions of that number. We scratch this away and just put a plus. We scratch whatever's in front of that away and put a plus. And one more thing I want to talk about, it's not parentheses, because if we said the parentheses of negative 15, that's just negative 15. So these are two different things. Just remember that, please. But let's just get to more complicated stuff, because you're going to see this on the worksheets and you don't need to know it. It's not life or death, but you easily can see that absolute value is something we like. It's something very simple, so they always want to make it complicated for us. So if I said this, what do you think that is? What do you think the answer would be? Exactly. The answer would be negative 4. And why it would be negative 4 is because, let's take this step by step. So first, we always have to do PEMDAS, right? We have PEMDAS, so we deal with the parentheses first. So negative 4 is just in the parentheses, but it's an absolute value. Absolute values fall into the parenthesis category in PEMDAS. You always have to remember that. So we have negative 4, which turns into positive 4 because it's an absolute value. We take the negative sign and we do multiplication. Or we could just leave it as is. But negative 4 is actually negative 1 times 4, which gets us negative 4. So that's kind of why if I said negative absolute value of 5, that would be negative 5. If I said negative absolute value of negative 15, we just saw that with the negative 4. It would be negative 15. So this is why it's very important, because you guys probably know that if I did this, that would actually be positive 15. Because if you watched our video on adding, multiplying, dividing, and subtracting negative numbers, you know that -1 times -1 equals 1. This is what that is. It's just -1 times -1 times 15. So it's just 1 times 15, which is 15. Because of the invisible ones, which you can check out in our videos. So that's kind of why you guys need to watch those videos before heading into this step, because if you have not watched that video on the adding, subtracting, dividing, and multiplying negative numbers, please check that out. That is not from me. I did not record that. That is from our other contributor. And watch that, please, because this step, you're going to need to know how to multiply negative numbers or divide or add them, whatnot. So if I gave you this, -3 times 8, what would you think the answer would be? Exactly, the answer would be 24. You know why? PEMDAS is why. We deal with whatever is in the parentheses. So we have to do the parentheses before we can actually work with the absolute value. -3 times -8 is -24. The absolute value of -24 is just positive 24, because we did that already with the taking away the negative and just turning it into a positive. Or just in simplified terms, whatever's in the absolute value will just turn into a positive value. If I said, now you could just be like, whatever, why don't I just turn this -3 to a positive 3 and that 8 to a positive 8 and then multiply them and get positive 24? That's the same way. Well, with multiplication and division, that works. But if I did subtraction, so if I did like, for example, -4 plus 3 in the absolute value. Let's -4 plus 3. Now let's deal with whatever's in the parenthesis. -4 plus 3, what is that? We know from the previous video, if you guys looked at it, that it should be -1, because 3 minus 4 equals -1. Okay? And -1, the absolute value of -1 is 1, because the absolute value, you just take the negative, or you take a positive and you turn it into a positive. However, if I made it 4 plus 3, because if I said, hey, the absolute value of -4 is 4, the absolute value of 3 is 3, and I added them, I would get 7. These are not the same answers. This is why you guys have to be very careful on reading your absolute value numbers, because it will get very, very complicated. So just take it step by step like we just did, and it will be a breeze. Absolute value should not be a topic that is meant to scare or is supposed to be hard. This is just supposed to be a topic that seems like a breeze the more you do it, and I promise you, the more you do this topic, the easier it will seem. And just one last advice for you guys. I was using PEMDAS a lot, and I just brought it up out of nowhere because I used it for organizational terms. I used it because I know the worksheets and the questions you will see will get very, very, very complex. Like, take this question. This is one of the questions on the worksheet. That is very complex. First, we have to do the p's. So all the stuff in the little parentheses. Absolute value of -4 is -4. We keep that. We keep the negative over here. Absolute value of 3 is 3. Absolute value of 6 is 6. Which gets us 1/2 actually. If you know your fractions. If you don't have to worry about those fractions. But if you do know your fractions, you can work with this. Negative times a negative gives you a positive. We cancel these out. 4 times 1/2 gives you 2. This is why 2 is your answer. Actually, I made a mistake. You guys caught me. Remember we said -4, the absolute value is +4, meaning that we don't cross this negative out, meaning that we get a -2 as our answer. Thank you guys for catching that. You see, if I'm not seriously paying attention to details and writing stuff all over the place, I'm going to make a mistake. This is why I have my PEMDAS here to simplify stuff. And always remember, when you're doing these problems, get the absolute values down, then do the multiplying and the negative and the fractions, simplifying stuff. Do all that stuff after. Worry about the absolute values and the parentheses first. That is why P comes first in PEMDAS. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed this little video here. Stay safe, stay cool, and stay learning. Bye-bye.